Hello, everybody. My name is Pastor Chris Anderson, and I want to welcome you to Margate Baptist Church. Last Sunday, I had the privilege of preaching at the village chapel, and we were having a good laugh about all the things that I'd heard about retirement life in the village, what I call happiness. We were laughing about the fact that public holidays have very little meaning and significance because when you are retired, every day is a public holiday. We were laughing about the fact that nap time is any time in the day, twice a day if necessary. With the rising fuel prices, there are some cars that are parked in the garages, and the last time they were filled up with petrol, it cost £1 and 2 shillings. Now that's a long time ago in South Africa. But before we laugh too much about getting much older, let's remember that midlife, the roaring 40s and 50s, have their own interesting challenges and changes as well. You know, as soon as you turn 40, teenagers think of you as ancient. At the age of about 45, it seems that gravity doubles its force. It goes from just below 10 to just above 20. And the changes are irreversible in most cases. At 47, you more than likely have your first slip in the shower. At 52, you don't care so much if you have to sleep on the couch occasionally. And then at 59, you start hearing Christmas Beatle choruses in your ears constantly. Well, the 60s have their own challenges, and I won't go into that today. Suffice to say, the other day I was leaving the house and my beloved wife said, "Goodbye, darling." And she wasn't talking to me, she was talking to the dog. We were going for a walk together. But age and stage of life aside, I want to talk today and continue with our series Together, the essence of what it means to be in a church family. We're going to be talking today about being together and thinking about the grand issues of life. What inspires you? What do you think about? What dominates your heart and mind when there are no boundaries? When you rise above 9 to 5 and you think beyond Monday to Friday, and you're able to just set your mind free, whatever stage of life you're in, and you rise above the finances and the family and the farm and the future concerns. Where does your mind and heart go to? I'm kind of asking you, what are you living for? And more importantly, what are you dying for? Last week in the church, Pastor Thomas spoke about being together in service and worship. And today I want to speak about being together and discovering love, a love that really matters, from Ephesians chapter 3. And we'll be looking at verses 1 to 21. I encourage you to read those verses. I'll just draw our attention to a few of them for time's sake. First of all, I want to ask you today, what are you living for? And Paul would ask as well, what are you dying for? Verses 14 to 21. Paul said, "I am a prisoner of Christ Jesus." And he said, "I am a servant of this gospel." You see, as we think about what we're living for, we're all a prisoner to someone. We're all a servant of something. To be a prisoner is usually considered to be a bad thing. And to be a servant is less than. It's lowly in character and position. But not in terms of Christianity, not at all to Paul. It was an honor and a privilege to be a slave of Christ Jesus, and a servant of the gospel was the pinnacle of his game and career. It was the height of his achievement, his highest aspiration. You see, Paul knew that the alternative, humanly speaking, would be that we submit to a much lower master and a totally inferior cause. So we are all prisoners to someone, and we are servants to something. It would be kind of like a football fan, now stay with me here, saying, I'd rather run onto the field of play at Anfield and serve oranges at halftime than be in the starting 11 at Old Trafford. Now, I'm kidding, of course, and that's just the kind of way that a true red-blooded Liverpool fan talks about Manchester United. But the psalmist in Psalm 84 puts it a little bit differently. He says, I would rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than dwell in the tents of the wicked. So we're all a prisoner to someone, and we're a servant of something. It's not something that we necessarily sort out once and for all, like when we're teenagers at a Youth for Christ camp, committing our lives to Christ. This is a recurring life priority decision-making process that needs to be made and maintained. Who has had you a prisoner all these years? Perhaps a domineering husband or a critical wife, a dictatorial boss or a constant critic. Maybe it's memories of something a teacher said to you 20, 30, 40, 60, 70 years ago. We can be imprisoned by a fake image on the internet. We can be captivated by people who are peddling substances or philosophies. Once you become a prisoner to a habit or an ideology, like fake news or grand conspiracy theories, a pack of lies perhaps, you are usually the last one to really see it for what it is. We can all recognize the prisoner mentality, the so-called Stockholm syndrome, but we can see it in ourselves by evaluating just how much time we give to these thoughts, how worked up we get when we are talking about related issues. You see, being a prisoner is usually a highly charged emotional state. What happens next is quite critical. You see, we either serve the master or we strive to replace him with everything opposite to what he represented. For example, if your master is poverty, then you'll serve money for the rest of your life. You hated being poor so much as a lad that you spend your life trying to chase after and amass a fortune so that you'll never have to feel vulnerable again. But wealth is a terrible master, and its rate of return is pretty low. Poverty is a lifelong slave driver. And even now, perhaps you are afraid of a falling rand against a rising dollar and worldwide recession and stock market crash and so on. Now, on the other side of the coin, though, sometimes if you're a prisoner for too long, you begin to believe that you're not worth much, and you serve that demon in your life. A prostitute who becomes the madam of the house is a sad example of this. She believes that she's not worth anything after a life of this kind of dishonor and abuse, and she becomes an enabler and does the same thing to the next generation of young girls. Usually, however, our taskmasters are not so obviously evil, but their grip is vice-like in our lives. Fear and insecurity and inferiority are powerful masters, and their servitude is equally as well disguised. It emerges as anger and pride, as bravado and selfishness. But Paul shares the alternative that is available to all believers. He says, be a prisoner of Christ, because he'll set you free from the bondage of the rat race, and be a servant of this majestic gospel, because you'll find eternal meaning and significance in pursuing this cause. When we do this, like Paul, we'll discover a much better way of living, and by the way, a better way of dying. So we come to the question, what are you dying for? Paul says three things. He suggests in verses 16 and 17 that we're all striving to be known. In verses 17, 18, and 19, we're all longing to be loved. And in verses 20 and 21, we're all hoping to be remembered. And Paul says, instead of spending your whole life striving to establish your own footprint, why not walk in the greatest footprint that was ever left on the earth, and seek, and here's a quote from the Bible, that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith. Live to make him known. Secondly, Paul says, man's most fundamental need is to love and to be loved. That's given. But why would you not accept the greatest love ever offered? Verse 17 says, to grasp the love of Christ, the fullness of God. He encourages us to discover the love for which we were born. And thirdly, he says, you've been writing your own resume unsuccessfully for so long that now you're thinking close to retirement about your own epilogue or epitaph, as it were. Why not work for the boss? Why not work for him? Because he is immeasurably more, and his power at work in you and me is so much more effective, and it's to him that the glory belongs. Give your life away in the pursuit of the legacy of Christ. As I come to the so what today, I want to share with you a hymn that was written a long time ago by George Matheson. Let me read it to you. O love that wilt not let me go, I rest my weary soul in thee. I give thee back the life I owe, that in thine ocean depths its flow may richer be. This hymn was written on the evening of June 6th, 1882, the day that Matheson's sister got married. Years before, George had been engaged until his fiancée learned that he was going blind and that there was no hope. The doctors said there was nothing they could do. She broke off the engagement, and she told him that she could not go through life married to a blind man. Now, Matheson never personally divulged the inspiration behind this famous hymn, but he confessed that it was born out of intense personal pain and suffering, and that it came to him more directly and easily in a period of 5 minutes than any other writing in his long pastoral work, which included publishing several books. Folks, George Matheson poured his life, together with the church family, into discovering the love of Christ, being a prisoner of Christ, serving the gospel of Jesus Christ. And he discovered a love that would not let him go. I was reading the other day one of the parables of Christ, and he told the story of how a man went out and employed people throughout the day at different times. But at the end of the day, he paid them all the same amount of money. And there was a lot of upset, humanly speaking. And Jesus said, if the master wants to pay the man employed at the 11th hour the same, a full day's wage, that's the master's prerogative. And folks, there are some people here who might be listening to this message who have never responded to the gospel of Jesus Christ, never become a prisoner of this wonderful person and a servant of this great gospel. And Satan would lie to you again. He wants to stay your master. He wants you to serve whatever you're in bondage to. And he would say to you, it's too late. You've wasted so much of your life. Why come at the 11th hour? Folks, I want you to ask you, do you know this love that will not let you go? Won't you respond to Jesus wherever you are, however old you are, however young you are? Find a love worth living for. God bless you, and goodbye for now.